Hey, thank you guys for being here this afternoon. It's to your advantage for what we're here for, that you will listen and hear. There'll be some times of question and answering at the close of each one of our sessions. I've given you about two different presentations here. You have the one of 27 documents, and you have the one of the other talk. Let me just briefly introduce you to what we'll do here this afternoon and what's going on in the coming weeks and months. One of the things that we've done is because we recognize this is such an important topic and there have been so many requests for what we do with this event of Family Matters, because of COVID, we couldn't do it on a large scale as we've been doing it previously. So we said, okay, let's do it. Our Boomer leadership team, we talked about it and said, let's do one at the time each month in the spring and 1 month in the summer as well as in the fall. So the efforts this afternoon for the next few months is to help you and other families to be better prepared when difficult issues arise, and they will. The focus and exercise of the other talk that I'll be doing this afternoon is to help you and your family to be proactive in learning how to respond, not react when these things come. Do you remember when you tried to have the first talk about the birds and the bees with your children at the beginning of their life? Was that a little bit awkward? Was it as awkward for you as it was for me? Only to learn, well, Dad, we're already aware of some of that stuff. Yeah. But the issues and decisions that will need to be made of the things that we'll talk about is you'll be glad that you came today to hear this. The discussion is meant to help get past some of the emotional barriers that do and will exist. I want to introduce to you a book that I found to be very helpful. I've also given to you a resource page with other books that is, I think, going to be of benefit to you as well. This guide is to help you to talk with your children about your wishes and your wants, and for beginning now the rest of your life. Too many have the mindset of ignore it and it'll go away. It won't. It only worsens. And so these are the topics. I'm not going to take the time to go over or read those to you, but I'm just going to mention the one for next month, April the 25th. Mike and Debbie Martin, Frank and Lois Platt have done an excellent job of applying these principles in talking with both of their sets of parents. So they've got a lot of practical experiences and some do's and some don'ts that they're going to give to you next month. And you'll want to come back and hear those as they have already gone through this. And then you see who's coming in May and in August and September and October. We're going to try to do a special one. I've talked to a state representative with the Alzheimer's Association that will be coming in June. Right now, she just does not know her schedule. So a little bit more information will be coming forward with regard to that. It's a privilege to me to be able to sit down here with my friend Rick Brown and share with you. He has about 40 years of banking experience. Some of you already know him. And we have done this before, and he'll be sharing some things with you regarding these 27 documents. And I'm going to follow up then with the information about how to implement this discussion with your family, with your children. Thank you for being here. Let me pray for us, or I'm going to ask Rick to pray for us as we get started this afternoon. All right, Rick?
Father God, we do praise you. We thank you. We thank you for the wisdom, the spiritual understanding that you give believers. And as we come today to begin this series of many topics that affect our families so much. We just pray that you'll bless it and that you'll use it, and that we'll really understand every bit of this in the context of being good stewards of all the blessings that you've given us. We thank you, we praise you in Jesus' name. Amen. This list that you have entitled 27 state-related documents is a checklist. I'm not going to just read off of it. I may a little bit on definitions and things, but it's a checklist. I feel certain that many of you know what these things are, but we're not here to launch a bunch of new information as much as we are to bring information to you to think about, and you use it in your family, in your context, in your life, and don't let something fall through the cracks. We don't have enough time, but I truly could give you a true war story on every item that we will go over that I saw people experience. And that may seem crazy. It did to me at one time. But, if you've been through estate settlements and you've been through some rocky ones, or friends of yours have, just simply knowing about these things and having prepared ahead of time puts you way ahead. And it can be so helpful right now for you and for your heirs, your beneficiaries, and the people that you love. So we just recommend that you consider each of these within your life, your context, and your family, and be aware of it more than anything else. Two things I'll say. We big time recommend each and every one of these items be readily at hand. You know where they are, you have them. If for some reason you don't have some of these items, that's kind of why we're here. It gives you a list that maybe you now need to address. The second thing is, this is in no way legal advice. I am not a lawyer. I learned the hard way not to play lawyer, okay? This is information that you might, some of it at least, you might take to an attorney. In fact, you're going to hear me recommend that you do so on some things. All right, let's jump right in. We don't have too much time. First off, everybody knows exactly what a will is for, right? Well, it is a legal document. It's an accounting for the disposition of assets and frequently the care of people. Sometimes we forget that. You need one. I could stop right now and talk the rest of my allotted times about people who died intestate. In other words, no will, and what that did, what that caused. So just know, if you want to make the decisions about your estate, you need a will. And if you want to make life a whole lot easier on the people that you love that will be handling your estate someday, you need a will. Okay, so it's a legal document to account for the disposition of assets and to help people. Okay, it really is. I also recommend, this is not a legal document, but I also recommend that right along with your will, you keep an annual signed list of personal property. Most states actually need that. It will delay certain legal proceedings in the disposition of assets if you don't have one. And this one can be as simple as typing it up on a sheet of paper, signing it and dating it with one witness. It doesn't have to be notarized, where the will has a lot necessary to conform that will. Okay. Another thing is a non-legal letter, which is really helpful to executors and probate judges, believe it or not, is a letter of instruction. It is not legal. It is not binding. However, I more than once have seen a probate judge ask if there was such a document because it would help him understand. Many probate judges really care about, the families and the people. and they're not going to just do something that's a cram down. And this can be real helpful, and it helps your heirs equally. A durable power of attorney. It's a document that authorizes somebody to act on your behalf while you are alive. There's probably exceptions to everything I'll say, but basically it applies to financial accounts, real property, personal property, and certain other business considerations. It just enables somebody to take care of business for you if you have a reason to give that to them, and it is effective while you're alive. Then there's a durable health care power of attorney. Many of you have heard about that, and I guarantee you Miss Carolyn sitting here has. And it's very similar, but one huge distinction. It is limited to health care. It's very, very helpful so that your wishes about your health care aren't left, unanswered. You deal with that ahead of time. That is one that, along with the will, and other power of attorneys, I think it's worth your time and effort to talk to an attorney and get that drawn up the way that you want it. Some people also recommend guardianship agreements right along with these documents, and that's for an attorney to talk to you about. Then there are advanced health care directives. These are just what they say. They're advanced health care directives that go into effect when you're unable to make your own health care decisions. Most times, in fact, maybe all times, a attending physician has to sign off on those. A thing that I think is excellent is that most hospitals nowadays provide such documents, and they're simple, they're easy to fill out. But again, it's something you may wish to speak with an attorney about. Advanced healthcare directives virtually are like a living will. The biggest distinction in a true living will is that it is almost always drawn up by an attorney, and it has very detailed instructions about that health care, not just general type statements. And it's particularly used and helpful if somebody is ill and suffers from certain health issues that require certain types of care, and should really be considered with an attorney, in my opinion.
Rick, can I ask a question?
Sure.
Is this where DNR
It comes up
would
in a
be
minute.
in there?
It can be.
Okay.
It certainly can be. Sometimes people prepare a completely separate DNR. Sometimes DNRs can be included even in their wills, for that matter.
Okay.
Number 7, the authorization to release protected healthcare information. You may say, well, that's a no-brainer. Well, but is it? Many times when you go to your primary care provider, and other doctors for that matter, they will have you fill out something that authorizes them to release information. Maybe you put a family member or a trusted friend or something like that, and that's good that you do that. But believe it or not, those authorizations for healthcare information can be extremely valuable if, unfortunately, your estate winds up with a will that is contested. I won't go into any more than that, other than I recommend doing it. Keep copies of it and give copies of it to the people it identifies. What's a trust? It's a legal document, and you hear an awful lot about trusts. It's a legal document that is, I put, best prepared by an attorney. I almost put should always be prepared by an attorney. I didn't. I pulled back just a hair. That's your decision, not mine. But anyway, a trust is administered by a trustee for the benefit of its members and its beneficiaries. Typically, you hear of revocable, irrevocable, and testamentary trusts. Sometimes you hear of living trusts. But the reality is there's probably hundreds of kinds of trusts out there that attorneys draw up for various reasons. Indulge me for one quick war story. more than I want to remember. Somebody that I cared a great deal about as a customer came in, established an account. Maybe it was just simply a checking account, maybe a certificate of deposit or something at the bank, one of the banks. And it's the trust of John Doe, or trust for the benefit of John Doe, or something like that. And here's my document that they produced off of .com, legal something.com online. I can tell you that there are a lot of those don't hold up. So I'm not going to go any further than that. I've seen some real heartache over that, particularly in a bank failure situation, leading to uninsured funds that they thought were insured. But the trust wasn't a valid trust, therefore insurance didn't apply. See a good attorney or a very knowledgeable financial professional. What's a real estate deed? What difference does it make? Well, among other things, it's a document that identifies real property as it is conveyed from one party to others. In other words, it becomes a new record owner document. So if I was to sign a deed for a piece of property I own, and Donnie was the recipient of that deed, he'd be the new record owner. Why I think, they're necessary. They're a conveyance. It's just a reality that has to happen. But what is important is that it becomes your evidence. Once recorded, it becomes your evidence of ownership. And that can make a huge difference when it comes time to probate something. Okay?
And Rick, it does make a difference as well as to what state you're in.
Very much.
Assets in another state, and
yeah.
But it has to be filed with that
yes.
record, state of record.
Usually, I think most states, at least, any that I'm aware of, it's in the county that the property is located. I've heard of some exceptions, that being filed with the Secretary of State in the state of New York, but they do a lot of things. Texas, it's your county, okay? If you don't have a copy of your deed. Yes. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. What period?
Look back.
Look back. I cannot answer that. I don't know for sure.
Jane, we'll mention that and talk a little bit about it in the next when I do the presentation I do. But yes, there is a 5-year look back but that doesn't account to spouses that if a couple, one of them is experiencing significant health problems, before Medicaid will pay anything to assist or help that family or that individual, they're not going to take all the assets away from the other spouse to meet the needs of the one spouse who has, even though they do have a home that is in part of all of that. They will not take it from the other spouse to take care of that existing issue with the spouse who is ill.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's one of the things that I would kind of dance around and say, see your attorney. And I'm not trying to dodge you, but there are some things it's best to see an attorney on. Lastly, on the deed, if you don't have a copy of your deed for however many property or properties that you own, you can obtain one in the public records of the county that you live in. They charge a very nominal fee to produce a copy for you. Income tax returns. There's been a lot of people had a lot of surprises over income tax returns. The only thing I want to say is make sure that you keep your income tax returns with your supporting data. I'm not going to tell you how long, but I am going to tell you that the IRS recognizes 0 time frame. In other words, they can go back as far as they want. You've probably heard somebody say, oh, they don't go back but 5 years. They don't go back but 7 years. Wrong. They can go back as far as they want. Okay? So if you want specific advice on that, see your tax professional to get their best recommendation. If I was giving a recommendation, 10 years. Okay. Bank accounts and investment. One of the biggest things about the bank accounts and investments that you have is keep them accessible, where, but secure, but where you can find them and the people that you want to find them can do so. It's amazing how people don't have records of sometimes very, very big, deposit accounts. So you need your records. I think it's wise to keep your original signature cards, your original certificate of deposit agreements, and then the most recent statements for some period of time. Just keep those on hand and be sure that whoever needs to know, and maybe you're the only one, although I don't recommend that, if whoever needs to know that they have any access information that they need, such as personal identification numbers, account numbers, passwords, things of that nature, that applies to a lot of these things.
Rick, can I ask you a question here? I know I've dealt with some families where the spouse that is deceased took care of all of that information. And the surviving spouse doesn't know where that is and what to do or what it even looks like. Is there an avenue that information materials can be retrieved from whomever, whatever institution that may
without a specific agreement otherwise? I'll qualify it that way. Only the people that were ever authorized to be account owners have perpetual access to those records. If you have someone who is a designated signer, not an account owner, but a designated signer, they actually can see it as long as you're alive. But that stops. A lot of times people think because they added their son or daughter or somebody to their account as a signer that that's all they really needed to worry about, then they pass away. That's the end of the signer's ability to access the account.
Okay. Thank
you. PODs would be different. That's what I recommend, is some form of a POD, payable on death agreement. It may be as simple as beneficiary designations, or you can actually have pay on death instructions. Your circumstances would determine that, but some of the investment companies have what they call transfer on death agreements, which really is kind of the same thing, and that's a way to pass it on legally, seamlessly. Okay. Safety deposit boxes and home safes, I believe in them, both of them. Just ensure that you, for sure, and your representatives have keys and whatever access information is needed to do just that, to access them, okay? If you have a safety deposit box down at the bank and you went down and signed the card and they gave you 2 keys, but you're the only one that signed that card, and then you hand your second key to your daughter or your son or something, they don't get in. They may have the key, but they're not on the account. They were never authorized. You're the one that did that. And I've seen people make that mistake before. And a lot of safety deposit boxes get drilled at some point in time because you can't find the keys. So just know that. And that's not cheap sometimes. This is a no-brainer. Debt. Keep current information on all your debt. Keep it accessible for those who need to know about it, especially whoever, if you have a will, and I hope and pray that you do, whoever your executor, sometimes they're called personal representatives, but I like executor better. Make sure that they have the ability to find these things out, to know who it is. You probably ought to discuss it with them ahead of time, because they're the ones going to be paying your debt. If you have no will, then the state's going to do it for you, and you don't want that. This one is amazing. Vehicle titles. All I'm going to say is, if you do not have your titles to all your vehicles or trailers or anything that is a title, it's kind of a on wheels sort of a thing, be sure you get one. If you don't have it, you can go to your Department of Motor Vehicles, Department of Texas calls them
Texas Department.
It's where I ran into you, remember?
Yeah. Texas.
I
Get your driver's license.
I met Donnie with a bang. Let's just say that.
Literally.
Let's keep going. Anyway, go get one. You can file for a duplicate. Probably you can do it online. Most states will let you if you don't have a lien. If you have a lien on a title, then you're probably going to have to do it in coordination with whoever the lien's with. Lost titles, they're a nuisance and they can delay things. Okay. Insurance policies. And notice I put all of them together: life, home, auto, and anything else. They need to be current. They need to be accessible. And when it applies, which primarily I'm talking about like life insurance, disability insurance, things of that nature, review those beneficiary designations at least once a year. Make sure they reflect what they need to reflect. Those can be updated with whoever you have your insurance with. Stocks, bonds, and other investments such as pensions and annuities. Outside of whatever income, hopefully, that you're deriving from them, they evidence your ownership. You need to have them in your hand, or at least some kind of a safekeeping receipt from a certified source that maybe handles them for you. In other words, this is your evidence that you own them, and it needs to be accessible and current. If you have bank CDs, that's really pretty easy. You should have them. You can get a copy, or at least there nowadays, half the time it's just a slip of paper, but it's legal evidence. But if we're talking about stocks and bonds and things of that nature, if you don't have something that proves your ownership on them, talk to your investment professional to get that, whatever their company provides. Remember, you're the customer. You're entitled to it, okay? And that can help so much down the line for your heirs. Individual retirement accounts. This information needs to be readily accessible, and probably even every bit as much, if not more, than stocks, bonds, and such owned outside of individual retirement accounts. Those beneficiary designations need to be reviewed very regularly, okay? Moving right on with that are like 401 and 403B accounts. And you may say, I know what a 401K is, but what is a 403B? Our teachers and the people that work for the public schools qualify for those kinds of accounts. Just be sure you keep all that documentation accessible, review it annually, keep any changes and updates, and especially your annual statements from whoever's the administrator of that account. All that does is just help. One, it'll help you, and two, it'll help an executor or the ones that you love receive what you want them to receive later. Partnerships, corporations, LLCs, limited liability companies, LLPs, limited liability partnerships and such. There's a lot of different styles to do business under. They're all legal entities. Be sure you have all your documentation. Sometimes if you incorporated and you used an attorney to do so, they keep a file with all those organizational documents. If you did it yourself somehow, be sure you have all those. They are critical when it comes time to probate. Assuming they do wind up in a probate, they're critical. Other accounts, funds, and business arrangements, I threw that in as a catch-all because, it's amazing what kind of business relationships you can get into. And if you and your next door neighbor decide one night, hey, let's go buy that trailer together, have a document that reflects all that and have it handy, okay? Do it right. It can avoid a lot of uncomfortable situations later. Let's see. Birth certificates. How many of you have an original certified copy of your birth certificate from the state you were born in? That is amazing. That's good. Usually you get about half the hands. Now here's the other half of that. Be sure that you do not have only a live birth certificate from an issuing hospital. That does not stand up for the IRS. It doesn't stand up for Social Security. It doesn't stand up for a lot of people. And a lot of times people have that and think that's their birth certificate, and it's not. Should you need one, the Vital Records Agency of every state is who you contact. Usually you can do it online. I even got one out of the state of Oklahoma in less than 10 days, so anybody can do it, right? So, I'm an Okie. I was born there. I'd moved, but anyway. Yeah. That's good. I always like it when I hear something like that, but do it safely. Go ask your 99-year-old uncle if he's or a grandfather if he has one now, and if he doesn't, get him one. It's easy to do. Very few people are unable to obtain an original birth certificate if you work at it a little. Medical histories and other medical information. This is important. You may keep exhaustive records of what you've done, and more power to you if you do. But just know that almost all of the major healthcare providers these days post your information on some kind of an internet web portal. And you need to follow that to make sure they got it current, too. Let me say that. That information, believe it or not, can be helpful in a contested will. I know you think, how could that possibly be? Trust me, it can happen. And that is a way to prove what their health was when they executed that will. Just little things like that. Marriage licenses, divorce documents, military discharges, and prenuptial agreements. Make sure you have them. Make sure they're readable, they're current, they were perfected and done right, because you may have to produce those later, for the benefit of heirs or any number of scenarios where these documents are very, very helpful. Okay. I'm hurrying, I know. Am I doing okay?
Yeah.
All right. Do not resuscitate orders. That was mentioned earlier. DNR. This may be the last document prepared and signed by you. It should be considered way ahead of time, not at the last minute. Okay. I don't pretend to give you advice on how to execute that. Your medical professionals and a good attorney, it's worth talking to them about if you have any questions. Number 26, this is a nightmare. A list of all user names, passwords, and pins.
How many of y'all have that now?
Yeah.
A few of you do. Does your executor know where that's at?
Well, I could give you some more stories there, but I have a feeling you all probably know of some too, so I won't. But anyway, just make sure that list is up to date and current, because, if you're like me, I forget passwords, so I have to go in. Forgot your password? You go through that routine, you realize you've changed it 6 times since you changed it back on your information sheet. So make sure it's kept current. That's the whole point. That can be so helpful to your heirs and executors. Lastly, This may well be the most important one of everything we've talked about. For Christians, and I thank Donnie for this. He's the one that drew this to my attention back the first time we did this thing. A testimony of faith, so that your heirs, grandkids that maybe you don't know well, great-grandkids that you don't know well, and others on down the line can know something about what was the most important part of your life. And being faithful to all of these things, believe it or not, that we've gone through is a part of Christian stewardship. Christian stewardship's big. It's not just writing a 10% check. There's even more, much more. So let me read you this last one, because you may wonder why I did not give you some kind of a definition about probate. Keep in mind, first off, probate occurs once you're gone. Okay, and I'm not going to jump on that one in this meeting. But this is a little helpful. This came from the Ultimate Texas Probate Guide. It says, when a person dies and leaves property that has not been transferred to another by way of trust, joint ownership with a right of survivorship, or direct payment benefits to a beneficiary, such as insurance policies, retirement accounts, property in Texas will be distributed through probate. That is as concise of an explanation of what probate is all about as possible. Many times it really relates mostly to real property. That's ground with improvements on it. But that's not all. It can wind up being other things too. If you have given all the above prayerful attention, your wishes will be carried out in a manner befitting a Christian steward.
Let him ask any questions.
Questions about any of this? I know it was fast, but it's a checklist to go home, think about, pray about, and then decide, is there something I need to do? That's really what it does for you. If you're talking about you have an investment professional, let's say you use Edward Jones or Fidelity or something, you will have a statement, but you will also have original trade confirmations. Yes, and everybody throws them in the trash. Keep them. I recommend keeping them. Drives my wife nuts, all the stuff, that I accumulate. But Walmart sells cheap little sliding drawers. I believe anything that you have that you can use to prove that you own it, or your executor, your beneficiaries, should there be an issue develop, yes. That's where an ounce of documentation and prevention is immeasurably valuable. Hopefully, it'll never be an issue with you. But if it is, it'll help somebody. Yes, ma'am.
Question 9.
You usually will get you said refinance, so that means a loan occurred, okay? And most closings occur at a title company, okay? The title company will normally send you your recorded deed a few days after closing. So yes, you should have that. If by any reason, chance, they stumble and don't get it to you, one, call them. You probably paid for it, but outside of that, you can go get your own copy once it's been recorded at the county, down at the county records, real estate records.
Any other? Yes, Brock.
Yes, effectively, but here's effectively, that's correct. But there's something else. if you have the deed clearly shows, say, you and your wife joint right of survivorship or some other language. Texas doesn't like the old JWTROS designation that I used for a long time, and it works great. But anyway, Texas for some reason doesn't like it. As long as there's language in there that clearly affects that, you're fine. Okay, you just got to read it. Maybe have your attorney review it if you want to. But here's my point. It wouldn't be on a real estate deed, but on a certificate of deposit, on a life insurance policy, things like that. As long as there is a good payable on death clause, usually that means beneficiary designation, and it's been done correctly and all that kind of thing. It's not going through probate. They got to pay you direct. It doesn't go to probate. Okay? Yeah, trust is a completely separate legal entity, and can be a fabulous agreement or it can be a major mix-up. If it's created properly with your best interest by a trained professional, it's a wonderful document in many cases, and it can be a nightmare in others.
And Michelle Audette will be covering all those ramifications in May when she comes. By the way, Michelle is an elder care attorney. On May 23, she'll be here. You want to save yourself about $250 and learn all of this information other than, including some of the things that you have heard this afternoon from Rick. And she will be here and will answer a lot of your questions for free. Her husband is the Medicare and Medicaid VA professional, and he will be here in front of her doing sharing the information regarding that.
I can say from our previous meeting, you know, I've lived in Weatherford 6.5 years, and I happen to have a lawyer in the family, so I don't go out and don't need one outside. But I can tell you that when Michelle spoke to us 2 or 3 years ago, whenever it was, I was impressed.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I mean, you've heard Michelle. Yes, separate events. He speaks to Medicare, Medicaid, and all the regulations and rules and so forth, and VA. She deals with elder care issues and trusts and wills and ladybird trusts and all of those other kinds of trusts. Okay?
That's a good question, Brock.
Excellent question. Any other questions? Okay, I have another meeting at 5 o'clock that I must be at. We've got 15 minutes to go over and share what I want to share with you, but let me also say that we are videoing these events over the next weeks, and I will go in and pre-record or record again those things that we perhaps don't get to include this afternoon. But we are going to go ahead and start with that. I want to introduce the book, The Other Talk. This is produced by AARP. It is one of the best books that I have read on this subject that we're going to be talking about today. And it is learning how to respond and not react. What's the difference between the two? What? Panic, okay. Responding is positive. You have been proactive. Reacting is that panic that sets in. Okay, now what do we do? Now where do we go? We hadn't, one thing I like, Larry, about the military is they always have a contingency. If you are a part of the police force or have ever been a part, they have a contingency. And even here at Northside, there are some things that we do have a contingency for. But we're to be proactive. And if we, as boomers, are seated here today, and parents, or rather children of boomers, we need to be proactive in letting them know and working with them about what we want to have happen to us in our estates and them for the rest of their life, for the rest of our lives, rather. And so you have a sheet regarding this, and why don't people have the other talk? Because it is an emotionally challenging subject. How many of you feel comfortable talking about now the rest of your life? The rest of your married life with your spouse, if your spouse hasn't deceased already. It is an uncomfortable thing. Emotionally, it's challenging. And so we're going to talk about this very thing, about why people don't want to face the inevitable transformation that will one day arise. As a pastor, I can't tell you in 46 years how many times and how many families that I have had to go back with and help work through fractured relationships and dealing with emotionally stressed people because of these situations. Sorting out and rebuilding relationships. To react is negative because it does cause stress, and there's heightened emotions that fractures relationships. Why don't people have the other talk? Well, it is an emotionally challenging thing, as I just said. We as parents must take a preemptive approach, I believe, to this potential crisis. The real responsibility rests on us. By doing so, I believe we will empower our family members to carry out our wishes and our wants as we have taken the time to go over with them what our will and what our wishes are. And the potential events that lie ahead. I have 3 very close friends now that are dealing with issues that they never thought would happen only 2 years ago. Things were set in motion that now they are going to have to deal with and going to have to face what is coming next. And what do we do next? I believe it helps to prepare various decisions and actions that will possibly need to be avoided, and some crises that would develop with your family. Do any of you have a crystal ball? There have been 1 or 2 times that I have conducted a memorial service for a loved one that passed away in his sleep, or that was just working in the yard and sat down and expired. Ideally, that's the way we'd like to go. But none of us know how nor when that will be. And so I believe that it's important for us to be able to write down, and all of us are experiencing, to some degree, declining health. How many of you have had COVID? Several of us have. Mine was in December, and I'm still dealing with issues regarding that. And there are some implications that I'm not sure how far-reaching that's going to be. Now, I've always been a person of good health, and I'm grateful for that. But my wife said, she just says, stop whining, get over it. There's some other things I want to do, and you're hampering that. So
we'll add number 28 next time for that.
While parents are physically and mentally able, it is you and me who need to lead such a discussion with our kids. And we're going to be talking about 4 essentials that all of us must ultimately face. One is you must consider financing your uncertain future. Now, there's a lot of us that have put aside some money, some nest eggs, some annuities, some retirement. And how many of you counting on everything that's going to come to you through the IRS, through Social Security? How many of you are counting on that? Yeah, no, don't, because it may not be there. How do you budget for the unknown, for the uncertain period of time that you may have to be in a nursing home, or that you may have to be in an assisted living facility? How long can you stay with your spouse, or your spouse can stay with you in the home where you live? What concessions are going to have to be made? Don't any of us know that? But we have to plan and try to prepare for it. Select the best living arrangements. A few months ago, Marcia and I sold our home here in Weatherford, our 3,400, almost 3,500 square foot home, because it was just us and the chocolate lab that were living there. And we weren't living in half of it. So we moved, we downsized to a 1,950 square foot house. And Marcia said, I like this better. I don't have to clean as much. And I don't have to mow around flower beds and flowers and all of that stuff. But we can't stay there forever. There's a decline and a deterioration. I know for Mike, Martin, and Diane, you've already dealt with a number of things and have some other things that you're dealing with now for your parents. That downsizing, the declining that's happening. How do you financially prepare for all of that? And selecting the best living arrangements. How much longer are you going to be able to live the way you are? Who's going to make those decisions? And when is the appropriate time to downsize, to sell your house, to go into independent living, to go into assisted living? Y'all know the difference between those? Well, we're going to have somebody come and talk to us about that too. So, getting the need for medical attention. Rick's already mentioned the statutory durable power of attorney that's necessary and essential. Do you have that in place now? Does that person know what your wants and wishes are? I sat down and talked to my mom and dad several years ago, and they wanted to make me their power of attorney over their affairs, both financially and health-wise. And I said, what I need you to do is tell me exactly what you want to happen and how you want it to happen and when you want it to happen. Well, as we started talking about that, my dad, who was a little bit headstrong. Y'all have any of those? How about you young people? Y'all have any of those with your parents? But he said, I'll let you know when it comes time. I said, Dad, now's the time. Now's the time. I need to know. And then what you're doing in essence is, number 4, you and I are taking charge for the end of our life beginning now. What we want to have happen, how we want it to happen, when we want it to happen. How do you know? Very often, we don't think there's any issue going on. The book of Ecclesiastes says there is a time for every season, a time to live and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to pluck up. Now, we know some of those things begin to diminish and begin to happen when, for instance, we get a little older. How many of you are having hearing problems? Or I see several of you. Yeah, Marcia and I were swinging in the swing the other day out in the backyard, and I took her hand and I said, honey, I'm proud of you. And she looked at me a little puzzled, and she said, well, I'm tired of you too. We all have those indicators that as we move away from when we were once young, that your kids know when certain things are happening, when to pull the keys, when to take the keys. Any testimonies there? Started meddling again, haven't we? Yeah. Yeah.
I will say one thing about taking keys. Somebody over here said, how do you do that? My wife, mother and dad, they did that. She took the good keys and gave them. No, it was not her mom, our mom. Yeah, my dad wasn't fit to drive, but he had to have the keys in his pocket. She got an old set of keys, wouldn't fit. Took those keys, put them in his pocket. He was real straight. It worked for him. He never lived there. Never. He never tried to go right.
What we need to be well aware of, and Mike, didn't y'all know it was Deb's dad that y'all gave him a key? He had it in his pocket, but it wouldn't start anything. It wouldn't go to any vehicle. I thought that was y'all. I thought that was a great idea.
Yeah, I don't remember exactly.
Yeah, yeah. Well, we want to maintain our existing relationships with our kids as long as we can, and with our parents as long as we can. But there's going to come a time, and I've seen it with my parents, and I'm concerned that my kids are going to see it before I do, that there's going to be a time of role reversal. And that's part of why we, I believe, need to be proactive in all of these things. Now, I just want to share one testimony about my situation with my mother in the last few days of her life. My sisters, I have 4 younger than me, and they know how to make emotional decisions. Now, what happens when you make emotional decisions? I'm sorry? Usually something comes back to haunt us. We need to, if we have taken the initiative to learn what our parents' wills and wishes are, then we can not have to make emotional decisions. My 4 sisters made a decision because my mother had fallen and a fractured hip and a number of other issues and complications. But they insisted that she go through a surgery of hip repair. The surgeon told them, I pleaded with them, let's don't put mom through this. Unfortunately, I love her as you do, but she's not going to live through this. And she didn't. Within 12 hours, she was gone. She had given us a directive, but I had transferred the power of attorney from myself to my sister, who was the primary caregiver, and she made the choice and made the decision not to have her go ahead and do the surgery. We want to do everything. Emotional decision. When you and I take the initiative to let our kids know what we want and why and when, what's the appropriate time? Y'all, we're a part of a group, as baby boomers, we're a part of a group that in 2011, there was what they called a perfect storm. That in 2011, there were some 78 million boomers who turned 65, who began to enter the system of Social Security. And in 2011, that jumped 21%. 65 and older, at that time, it went up to 3.3 million. By 2030, that means there'll be 20 years since they turned 65. There will be 5.8 million boomers. Now that says something. That says, number one, the government's not going to be able to take care of us. So we better be doing some planning to take care of us and how we want our kids to do so. Number two, pardon me. Rick, can I have some of your water? I was just kidding. Also the fact is that family caregivers are getting smaller. My dad had 8 brothers and sisters, and my mom had 5 brothers and sisters. What's the average kids born into boomers families? 2.3. Not very much. That means caregivers are getting smaller. So the government's not going to take care of us. And our kids, now if you've got if you've got a daughter, you probably are going to be okay. Knuckleheaded boys, don't count on it, okay? And then the fact that geographically our kids are moved all over the country. And then third and finally, most wives is taking 2 people in the household working to make ends meet. And so they're not going to be available. That, to me, is incentive for us to talk about this other talk. As soon as I can get that done this week, I'm going to send each of you a link to this for the remainder of this presentation. So I'll sit and do it, and it'll take about 30 minutes. But I want to thank you for coming. I want to give you a minute to answer any questions, and I'm going to have to rush to another meeting. I appreciate your being here. I hope and trust that it's been beneficial to you, and I will cover the remainder of this outline about the other talk, and we will get it to you. Could I ask you please to just sign a piece of paper that I'm going to put over here so I'll know who has come and how to get this information, to get that link to you, okay? Thank you for being here, and I trust that what's been said this afternoon has been beneficial to you and your family. Lord bless you, and we'll see you again, okay?